Picture this, you wake up tomorrow morning with no toothbrush, no toothpaste, no mouthwash, nothing sitting on your bathroom sink at all. Your teeth already feel fuzzy just imagining it. Here's the twist. Humanity faced that exact reality for almost the entirety of human history. And the solutions people came up with, some genuinely brilliant, some genuinely alarming, shaped the modern toothbrush and toothpaste sitting in your bathroom right now. Almost nobody realizes just how strange, how creative, and honestly how gross some of the earliest dental care routines actually were. So let's go back, way back. Start with the simplest possible solution, one so old it stretches back tens of thousands of years, long before anyone had a word for dentistry: the chew stick. Early humans across nearly every continent independently discovered the same basic trick. Take a thin green twig, chew one end until it frays into soft, brush-like fibers, and use that frayed end to scrub along the teeth and gums. Stop and think about how elegant that actually is. No factories, no plastic, no synthetic bristles of any kind, just a stick, some patience, and a little bit of chewing, and you've built yourself a functional toothbrush using nothing but a tree branch. Here's where it gets even more interesting. This wasn't some crude accident either. Certain trees were specifically prized for this purpose because their wood contained natural antibacterial compounds. In the Middle East and across much of the Islamic world, one particular stick became so effective and so deeply woven into daily life that it's still used by hundreds of millions of people today. It's called the Miswak, cut from the arak tree, and it does something remarkable. As you chew one end, it doesn't just fray into bristles. It actually releases natural compounds that help fight the exact bacteria responsible for tooth decay and bad breath. Think about that for a second. Long before anyone understood what bacteria even were, entire civilizations had already identified, purely through trial and error passed down across countless generations, a tool that happened to be genuinely antimicrobial. That's not luck. That's thousands of years of accumulated observation. Now let's jump to a completely different civilization and an entirely different approach to the same fundamental problem. Ancient Egypt more than 4,000 years ago, and here's the part that genuinely surprises people. Archaeologists have actually found what's widely considered the oldest known toothpaste recipe in written history, inscribed carefully on papyrus. The ingredients read almost like something from a bizarre kitchen experiment: crushed rock salt, dried iris flowers, dried mint, and ground grains of pepper, all combined into a fine powder. Picture an ancient Egyptian household grinding these ingredients together with a stone mortar and pestle, then rubbing the resulting paste onto their teeth using a small brush or simply their fingertip. According to the very same papyrus, this mixture was described as creating what translates roughly to a, quote, beautiful mouth. Not just clean teeth, a beautiful mouth. Oral hygiene, even 4,000 years ago, was already tied to status, beauty, and personal pride, not just basic health. But here's the twist nobody expects. Egyptian tooth powder recipes weren't gentle. Many contained genuinely abrasive ingredients, including crushed pumice stone and ash. Effective at scrubbing away buildup, certainly, but almost certainly rough enough to wear down enamel over years of daily use. The earliest dental care on record was already walking a fine line between cleaning and quietly damaging the very teeth it was meant to protect. Before we get to Rome, let's take a quick detour to ancient India, because the story there runs on a strikingly similar track, just with a different tree entirely. In traditional Ayurvedic medicine, practiced continuously in India for well over 2,000 years, physicians specifically recommended chewing on twigs from the Neem tree every single morning. And once again, this wasn't just folk superstition dressed up as medicine. Neem bark and leaves genuinely contain natural antibacterial and anti-inflammatory compounds, meaning an entire subcontinent had independently arrived at essentially the same conclusion as the arak tree users of the Middle East, using a completely different plant, on a completely different continent, with no contact between the two traditions whatsoever. Think about how remarkable that actually is. Two separate civilizations, separated by thousands of miles and centuries of isolation, both landed on the exact same core idea: find a tree with natural antimicrobial properties and chew it into a brush every morning. Neither one had a microscope, neither one understood bacteria, and yet both got the underlying science essentially right, purely through generations of careful trial and error. Now brace yourself, because we're about to get to the part of this story that genuinely shocks almost everyone who hears it for the first time. Ancient Rome had a mouthwash problem, or more accurately, a mouthwash solution, and it was one of the strangest, most audacious ideas in the entire history of personal hygiene. Wealthy Romans, obsessed with achieving strikingly white teeth, discovered that a particular liquid worked remarkably well as a whitening rinse and cleaning agent. That liquid was urine. Yes, genuinely, actual urine, and specifically the most prized variety was imported all the way from Portugal, because aged fermented urine was believed to be significantly more potent than the fresh version. Roman traders built entire supply routes around shipping jugs of this stuff across the empire, and wealthy citizens paid a serious premium for the imported variety over whatever was locally available. Here's the twist that actually makes this slightly less insane than it initially sounds. Urine contains ammonia, a genuinely effective cleaning and whitening compound, one still used in some modern cleaning products today. Romans had, completely by accident and with zero understanding of chemistry, stumbled onto a real, functioning whitening agent. It absolutely worked. It was also, by any modern standard, spectacularly unpleasant, and the Roman poet Catullus even famously mocked a rival for his suspiciously gleaming teeth, essentially accusing him publicly of brushing with urine. Imagine confidently smiling at someone in ancient Rome, only for them to immediately suspect exactly what you'd been rinsing your mouth with that morning. And Rome wasn't finished being strange yet either. Beyond the urine rinse, wealthy Romans also relied on abrasive tooth powders made from crushed bones, oyster shells, and even ground eggshells, all mixed together and applied with a small stick or a finger. Roman physicians additionally wrote about extracting decayed teeth using crude iron pliers, an experience that, by every surviving account, was every bit as painful as it sounds, performed with no anesthesia beyond perhaps a strong cup of wine beforehand. Here's a detail that genuinely surprises people. Archaeologists excavating Roman sites have actually found gold dental bridges and replacement teeth, meaning wealthy Romans who lost teeth to decay or extraction sometimes had crude but functional dental prosthetics crafted specifically for them. Rome, in other words, wasn't just obsessed with cleaning teeth. It had already begun experimenting, in a rough and rudimentary way, with actually replacing them. Let's pull ourselves out of Rome and travel forward into medieval Europe, because things get considerably less chemically inventive, and honestly, a fair bit more abrasive. During the medieval period, sophisticated tooth powders mostly fell out of common use for ordinary people. Instead, the standard method across much of Europe involved something remarkably simple: a rough piece of linen cloth, sometimes dipped in a mixture of salt and ash, rubbed directly across the teeth and gums. Physicians of the era did write about dental hygiene, recommending various herbal rinses using ingredients like sage, mint, or cloves to freshen breath and soothe sore gums. But for most people, daily cleaning meant scrubbing with whatever rough cloth and abrasive powder happened to be available at home. Here's an uncomfortable truth about this entire stretch of history. Dentistry as an actual medical specialty barely existed. Barbers, yes, the same barbers who cut hair, frequently handled tooth extractions too, using crude iron tools with essentially no anesthesia beyond perhaps a strong drink beforehand. Toothaches were common, dental disease was rampant, and prevention, when it happened at all, relied entirely on abrasive scrubbing rather than anything resembling modern dental science. Meanwhile, on entirely different continents, other civilizations were quietly running their own parallel experiments. Native American communities across North America chewed the frayed twigs of sassafras and other locally available trees, much like their counterparts across the Middle East and India. Viking communities in the far north relied on carved bone toothpicks, kept close at hand and used regularly before feasts and gatherings, and Norse sagas even mention personal grooming and dental care as small but genuine markers of social status. Meanwhile, across Central America, Maya dental practitioners were doing something even more advanced. They filed teeth into decorative shapes and inlaid small pieces of jade and other precious stones directly into the enamel, a practice that required real precision and appears to have caused surprisingly little long-term dental damage, based on the remarkably well-preserved skeletal remains archaeologists have since studied. Every one of these cultures arrived at their own version of dental care completely independently, using whatever materials their environment happened to offer, decades and centuries and even millennia apart, with zero communication between most of them whatsoever. Different continents, different trees, different centuries, the exact same underlying instinct: keep the mouth clean, keep the breath fresh, and keep the teeth functional for as long as humanly possible. Now let's shift continents again, because the actual bristled toothbrush, the direct ancestor of the one likely sitting in your bathroom right now, wasn't invented in Europe at all. Head to China during the Tang Dynasty more than 1,000 years ago. Chinese craftsmen developed something genuinely revolutionary: They took stiff bristles harvested from the necks of hogs, specifically from cold climate regions where the bristles grew thicker and more durable, and attached them firmly to a carved handle made from bone or bamboo. Stop and appreciate what an enormous leap that actually represents. Instead of a single frayed stick, you now have multiple firm bristles, densely packed, specifically engineered for effective repeatable scrubbing. This design eventually made its way westward along trade routes, slowly influencing European dental tools over the following centuries, though it would take remarkably long for it to catch on widely outside of Asia. Here's the twist: Europe was surprisingly slow to adopt this obviously superior design. For centuries, cloth and abrasive powder remained the norm across most of the continent, even as a demonstrably better solution had already existed elsewhere in the world for hundreds of years. Eventually, though, someone in England finally connected the dots, and in one of history's more unlikely origin stories, they did it from inside a prison cell. In the late 1700s, an Englishman named William Addis found himself imprisoned, and according to popular historical accounts, grew frustrated using the standard method of the era, a rag rubbed with soot and salt to clean his teeth. Instead, he saved a small animal bone from a meal, drilled tiny holes into it, and acquired bristles from a guard, which he then tied into small tufts and threaded through the holes, sealing them in place with glue. He'd essentially reinvented, likely without even realizing it, a design remarkably similar to what Chinese craftsmen had perfected 1,000 years earlier. Upon his release, Addis began manufacturing these bone-handled bristle brushes commercially, and the business he founded eventually grew into one of the largest toothbrush manufacturers in the world, one whose descendant company, remarkably, still produces toothbrushes today. Think about how strange that actually is. The modern toothbrush sitting in bathrooms across the entire planet right now traces its most direct European origin story back to a prison cell. Now, here's a turning point that genuinely changes the entire trajectory of this history, because toothpaste itself, in anything resembling its modern form, is far, far newer than most people assume. Throughout the 1700s and 1800s, tooth powders remained the norm, sold in small ceramic pots and tins from pharmacy shelves. But here's the twist nobody expects. Many of these early commercial tooth powders and pastes contained actual soap. Chemists discovered that soap helped create a satisfying foaming action and assisted in lifting away grime. So early tooth cream formulas frequently combined chalk, soap, and various flavoring agents like flavoring oils, all mixed together into a thick paste sold in jars. Imagine brushing your teeth every single morning with something that genuinely tasted, at least partly, like actual soap. That was simply the accepted normal for generations of people. Now for an invention that sounds almost too small to matter, yet fundamentally transformed how toothpaste reached ordinary households everywhere. In the late 1800s, tooth cream was still packaged the same clumsy way it had been for decades, in heavy ceramic jars, requiring people to dip their fingers or a brush directly into a shared pot, an obviously unhygienic practice by any modern standard. Then, a dentist observing artists squeezing oil paint from soft, collapsible metal tubes had a genuinely brilliant realization. Why not package toothpaste exactly the same way? The collapsible metal tube design, borrowed directly from the art supply world, revolutionized toothpaste almost overnight. Suddenly, toothpaste was portable, hygienic, and remarkably easy to dose out a proper amount for each individual use. Families across wealthy countries eagerly adopted this obviously superior packaging, and within just a few decades, the heavy jar of shared tooth cream had become almost entirely obsolete. Here's the twist worth sitting with. One of the most transformative shifts in the entire history of oral hygiene wasn't really a chemistry breakthrough at all. It was simply better packaging, borrowed directly from an entirely unrelated industry. Now let's bring this story right up to the edge of the modern era, because the final major breakthrough came from an unexpected direction entirely, an actual scientific mystery. In the early 1900s, a young dentist relocated to a small town in Colorado and noticed something genuinely bizarre. An enormous number of local residents had strange brown stains permanently etched into their teeth. Yet, and this is the strange part, those same stained teeth were remarkably resistant to cavities, far more resistant than teeth anywhere else he'd previously examined. He spent years investigating, eventually discovering the actual cause: unusually high natural levels of fluoride in the local drinking water. Too much fluoride caused the staining, but smaller, carefully controlled amounts appeared to significantly strengthen tooth enamel against decay without causing any staining whatsoever. This discovery eventually led directly to the deliberate addition of fluoride into modern toothpaste formulas, and it remains, to this day, one of the single most effective advances in the entire history of preventing tooth decay. Ironically, the entire breakthrough only happened because of a strange, unexplained mystery involving stained teeth in one small American town. It's worth pausing on just how recent that actually is. Fluoride toothpaste, something most of us have simply always taken for granted, only became widely available in the 1950s, which means in the grand multi-thousand-year sweep of this entire story, the version of toothpaste sitting in your bathroom cabinet right now is genuinely one of the newest chapters in the whole timeline, arriving only a few generations ago, after tens of thousands of years of chew sticks, powders, cloth, and soap. So here's the real question worth sitting with. Every single method we've just walked through, frayed chew sticks used across the ancient world, imported urine mouthwash in Rome, hog bristle brushes engineered in Tang Dynasty China, a prisoner carving bristles into bone, soap-flavored tooth cream sold in jars, a packaging idea borrowed from painters, and finally an accidental scientific discovery involving stained teeth in a small mining town, represents literally tens of thousands of years of humanity solving, and repeatedly resolving the exact same fundamental problem using nothing but careful observation, patient trial and error, and remarkably often, zero real scientific understanding of the underlying biology actually at work. The toothbrush and tube of toothpaste sitting on your bathroom counter right now aren't really a brand new invention at all. They're simply the latest, most convenient chapter in an extraordinarily long, genuinely fascinating human story, one that stretches back long before anyone even had a word for bacteria or enamel or cavities. So next time you casually squeeze toothpaste onto your brush, take one quick second to actually think about it. You're standing at the very end of an unbroken chain of human ingenuity, stretching all the way back to a frayed green twig chewed by someone standing in a forest, tens of thousands of years before anyone had ever imagined a bathroom sink. Let us know in the comments which ancient method genuinely surprised you the most. And subscribe because next time we're taking apart the history behind something completely different.